Hey guys, so I actually had been wanting to go live for a couple of days, but I have been out with like the worst head pain of all time. And so I'm actually about to go live now with a conversation that was not my intended live. My intended live was to look at a work from Du Bois, um, but I'm going to save that for another day because it's just a much deeper conversation. And to be honest, my head still hurts a little. But my family has been awesome, and the kids are all tucked away in their corner. And I'm sitting in a dark room relaxing, and I figured I could have this conversation even though my head still hurts a little. Hopefully, talking to you guys will help distract me from the fact that technically I'm still in a little bit of pain. But I wanted to have this conversation, and I hope you guys can hear me because I can't really project the way I want to. I wanted to have this conversation about, is Black a status? And this has become really popular rhetoric. And the reason that I was prompted to have this conversation is because, hey, little Miss Chocolate, hey, Nikki, is because Mr. shared an article with me titled, Anyone Should Be Allowed to Identify as Black. So I want to share this article with you. I'm just going to read it really quick. And then I'm going to get into some other conversation because we hear people who justify this idea that Black is a status and not a skin color. In other words, people of any skin color can access whiteness. And you hear certain groups of white people being used as an example of this, but I'm going to debunk that in this live. And I also want to talk about the dangers of this rhetoric, um, and how this rhetoric is eating off of uh, race as a social construct, which is true, and moving into a territory that's very disingenuous and is actually quite insidious. So, hi, Goodness Rated. Hi, Kevin. All right, so let's start with the article that prompted this live of conversation about if Black is a status. And I probably will put the link in the chat if anybody believes that Black is a status and they would like to share that, their talking point with me. I'd be happy to discuss it. But I just want to set the premise first. So, the Universities and Colleges Union, and this is in the UK, have insisted that people should be able to choose their own gender and race. So we're going down this rabbit hole where there are no finites in life. You guys know I've been drug on this channel over the past week for saying that there are various cultures and some things are more culturally acceptable in other cultures than they are in Black culture. And so people are trying to pretend that we're all the same. This new thing is that everybody has their own truth. And so people can pick whatever they want to be. They don't have to be a man. They don't have to be a woman. They don't have to be a man or a woman. They can be nothing. They can be they. And obviously, the piggyback to this is then again, people are able to pick other things about themselves. So they can decide that they're not a certain race. They can decide they're not really a certain age. Like at this point, everything is subjected. Nobody's a man or a woman. Nobody's Black or white. Nobody's 20 or 5. You have people identifying any way they want. And so it's a slippery slope, but we've started with first sex and now race. So this union, the Universities and Colleges Union, right, Kevin, it's chaos, it's pandemonium, really. The University and Colleges Union in the UK has claimed that anyone should be allowed to identify as Black, regardless of their skin color or background. The stance was revealed in a report from the Universities and Colleges Union, centered around the ongoing debate about whether men should be allowed to self-identify as women, after they faced criticism over their labeling of transgender people. The body, which represents 120,000 academics, said in their statement that they agree with self-identification of gender, but also race. The union said, "Our rules commit us to ending all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and stereotyping." And this is difficult because this new kind of new age generation, right, of people, they think the way to end bigotry and stereotyping is to pretend that everybody is the same, right? If we all pretend like we're all the same and there are no differences, that's going to be the only way that we can end bigotry and stereotyping. So I have to pretend like I don't see your skin color. I have to pretend like I can't tell if you're a man or a woman. I have to pretend like we don't have different cultures. I have to pretend like you're not tall and I'm not short. I have to pretend that these things don't exist, right? I have to function in a state of dysfunction in order for us all to get along. That is really what people think. If we just erase all the lines, then we'll all get along. Not respect the lines, right? Not respect the lines, not respect the people, not fix our own trash. No, just pretend like none of these things exist. And this is essentially what they said. They said our rules commit us to ending all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and stereotyping. UCU has a long history of enabling is the correct word, members to self-identify, whether that is being Black, disabled, a person can self-identify as disabled, LBT plus, or women. So basically, whatever you want to be. Okay. And again, if I say that this is culturally European, this concept of pretending reality doesn't exist to create a debaucherous society where nobody is male or female, nobody is anything, right? There's no age, so we can have sex with anybody. They could be a child, but there's no such thing as a child. If I talk about how this is culturally part of what Europeans do, and I provide historical proof of that, then people will call me racist, right? But note that what I'm reading is from Europe, right? They are reinventing their most prided societies, which are Greece and Rome. We cannot argue that these are not their most prided societies. When you walk into a museum here in America or Europe, what do you see being upheld above all other European societies? Let's just be serious. Go to your local museum and tell me what is being held as the pinnacle of it all, right? Greece and Rome are being held as the pinnacle of it all. I could go into a rant just on that. So apparently they enable, which is the correct word, their members to self-identify as being Black, disabled, LGBT plus, or women, whatever you want to identify as. If you want to identify as an amputee, even though you have 2 arms and 2 legs, identify on in Europe because that is what they're doing. They added, UCU also supports a social rather than medical model of gender recognition that will help challenge repressive gender stereotypes in the workplace and in society. So apparently it is repressive, right? They're willing to acknowledge there's a medical form of gender, meaning I have ovaries, and don't nobody come in here talking about all women don't have ovaries. The reality is when we talk about people who are intersex, they actually do gender male or female. The confusion comes in is that people who are intersex, as we like to call them, because they have not fully developed. So the organs, the bits and pieces are present. They just are not fully developed. And then you have parents who decide, I want a daughter, even though what they really have is a male with internal testes. But since the testes, which are male parts, are internal, then those parents are capable of picking a woman, and then you get a quote unquote woman without ovaries or a womb. But the reality is that child was never a woman. That child was an underdeveloped male. And that is evident by the presence of the testes, right? So if we were really having this conversation, medically speaking, everybody is either male or female, right? Everybody is either male or female. The word intersex could be exchanged in a society that wasn't ruled by Europeans for underdeveloped meaning you have the bits and pieces that would identify you as male or female, but they are underdeveloped. You have the testes of a male, but they did not drop, they are internal. That means you're still a man with internal testes, right? Because you did not fully develop. But because Europeans run science, they use these tricky words and it's a slippery slope. Nevertheless, this college acknowledges, with intersex people to the side, that there is a medical definition for male and female. But they want to remove medical definitions and replace them with social definitions. Because again, if we pretend that there's no such thing as race, and yes, I'm going to get to the topic, which is Black a status. If we pretend like there's no such thing as skin color, there's no such thing as male or female, there's no such thing as Black or white, there's no such thing as being disabled or not disabled. It's all how you feel. If we erase every line and allow people to call themselves anything or nothing at all, then that will mean that society will not be bigoted and hateful anymore because we've erased all the lines. There's no lines to cross. There's no lines to feel some kind of way about, right? So they say many criticize the union's position on race, including union member and Sussex University. So Sussex University is a member of this union because remember, this concept is a European concept. This behavior is part of their culture and it's bled into American society because we were founded by Europeans and our country has a majority European population. So this sickness of the European culture to want to erase lines so that they have a society that is sort of a free-for-all society, and them doing it under the guise of social justice is nothing new. Nevertheless, you have Sussex University philosophy professor Kathleen Stock, who said the union's position on race was nonsensical and anti-intellectual propaganda. Can I go on the record and say that all of this line erasing that people are trying to do in the name of social justice, all of it is nonsensical. All of it is nonsensical. All of it is anti-intellectual. All of it is propaganda. The whole gamut, the whole thing. Stock added, it's fairly simple. Being a woman, being Black, and being disabled are each causal factors in distinctive patterns of mistreatment and discrimination. This is important. If Black can be anything, then what does the history of Black people mean? Imagine a world where Black doesn't have a meaning. Then when we talk about chattel slavery, when we talk about what went on in the Fijian Islands, when we talk about the history of Australia, when we talk about colonization of Africa, if you remove the definition of what Black is, then what does it historically mean, right? How do you fight for justice for people who don't exist? Right? How do you talk about something that factually happened because of a person's skin color if all of a sudden skin color doesn't determine Blackness? And I'm still not even jumping all the way into Black as a social status yet because I'm going to get to why that's bullshit. But I just want to start here. Just the nonsensical, disingenuous nature of it all. Just how are we going to teach history? It's like sexual education. Them telling little girls that, that some girls have penises and telling little boys that some boys get periods. This is a real thing that people have started to do. It's stupid. No little boys get penises. I'm sorry, no little boys get periods. Men do not get menstrual cycles. Menstrual cycles require a womb, they require ovaries, they require fallopian tubes, they require eggs, and the non-fertilization of that egg, and the building up of a uterine lining, which requires a uterus. You know what I'm saying? So this is very pseudo-intellectual. So I'm with her on that. you start to not make sense, right? We can't talk about history honestly. We can't teach gender honestly. We can't do anything honestly with all this line racing. I know a lot of these people are very stupid, but very genuine in wanting to end all divisions in humanity. But that's not going to happen by us all pretending that these things don't exist. That's not how we go about this life. All that's saying is you're too racist and bigoted. And you guys know I don't think bigotry is always a bad thing, but you're far too far gone to actually correct your own behavior. So it's best for us to pretend that there's no elephant in the room. I mean, that's really the methodology, right? Let's pretend this doesn't exist, because if we pretend it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. So Stock added, it's fairly simple. Being a woman, being Black, and being disabled are causal factors, meaning if you are Black, if you are a woman, if you are disabled, it causes problems, right? It causes discrimination, it causes mistreatment. We don't erase that by pretending disabled, Black, and women don't exist. We don't stop the mistreatment of people by pretending that they don't exist. By erasing their identity is not how you protect people. Does UCU think academics should be allowed to use distinctive names and non-subjective categories for those causal factors or not? This is facts. Again, history and language will lose all meaning if we want to pretend that the only way to stop discriminating against people is to pretend that they don't exist. These are just all made up things that don't exist. So since they don't exist, you cannot discriminate against them, and anybody can be them. She goes on to say, in the US, Rachel Dolezal, oh wait, I'm sorry. Another commenter said the statement was racist and stupid. And that's what they call you, right? They call you racist and they call you stupid, even if you're part of the oppressed group, right? So I'm a whole Black woman over here, and I've been called racist and stupid because I refuse to think like an insane person. I am both racist and stupid. Controversy. In the US, Rachel Dolezal, because remember, again, these concepts are European. So now the Europeans are looking at the United States. They said in the US, Rachel Dolezal self-identified as a Black woman, but was exposed as a white woman during a TV interview, sparking a worldwide debate. She quit her post as an official at the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in 2015, after her parents confirmed she was not Black. In the UK, white theater director Anthony Leon faced criticism for identifying as an African born again. He identifies as an African born again, and securing public funding intended to help develop the careers of those from underrepresented communities. So he identified as African born again and then got funding for his theater company through monies that were intended for Black people. Now, it's the comments that got me to do this live. And it was one comment in particular. Let me go ahead and read it because it was pretty. There were a few comments. Who are you to determine what her authentic self is? Sorry, if you can identify as a coffee table, which biology says you're not, then someone can identify as whatever race they want. And just saying Black, well, that's racist. I mean, I was called a racist for saying that there was a such thing as Black culture. I was told not all Black people were the same. So apparently the extremes are there's either no Black culture or we're all a monolith. We can't all be different Black people sharing a culture. That would be too much like sanity. We either have zero culture or we're all exactly the same. These are the extremes of thought that crazy people have. Somebody else said, yeah, many whites have for years identified themselves as the offspring of ancient Egyptians. So this was the comment that caused me to do this video. Here it is. It says, I thought the human race consists of man and mankind. The color code system still exists, and the university scholars should teach the students its status, not skin color. And that's what prompted this live. The teaching of Black as a status and not a skin color is why I'm doing this live. So I want to dig into the teaching of Black as a status versus a skin color. And after this is over, you guys, I'll put the links to everything I'm reading in the chat. But I want to talk about, is Black really a status? Because it has become a popular rhetoric as of late. Hi, B1 for life and Black Power Razi. I have heard this as of late, that Black is a mindset, that Black is a status, that Black has nothing to do with skin color. I've heard people saying people come from Egypt with Black skin and identify as white. A more common one that I hear is that the Italians became white. So let's just tackle some of these really misrepresented things, right? Let's start with the first thing, Italians becoming white. Let's really talk about what happened to the Italians, because I can't be the first person who has ever heard that Italians were classed as Black but became white. And I'm here to tell you that that's a little bit of lying from history. That's not exactly what happened. That's not exactly what happened. So let me tell you what really happened with the Italians. Can we just have a history lesson right now? So that every time somebody says Italians became white and they used to be Black, people just don't go, well, that's hook, line, and sinker, because it's not, okay? So you know that as far as like who was considered a person in America, it was really ideal to be Protestant and white, okay? And the law used to be that the only people who could come into America were free white people. Like that was literally the language that they used. Only free white people could migrate to America. You had to be free and you had to be white. Those were the only people that were able to become naturalized citizens. That used to be the law of the land. Okay? So basically, anybody from Europe could come. I mean, that's just what the fact was. You had to be free white. If you're from Europe, you can come. Now, Europeans come in a variety of shades of white. Do they not? They're olive, some are darker, some are lighter. They're all white though. Some are super pale, some are more olive complected. None are actually Black. And so Europeans started to migrate into the United States. And there was a term called whiteness of a different color. That meant that you were white, but you weren't ultra white, right? You weren't Hitler white. You weren't like blonde hair, blue eyed. You weren't like super white skinned. You were still white though. You were still European. But those would be our Spaniards, right? Those would be our Italians. Those would be our olive complected whites, which if you put next to a Swedish person, they do look a lot darker. Can we say that? I mean, human color is on a spectrum. Just like if you put me next to somebody from the Sudan, I'm probably going to look light-skinned. Europeans have the same sort of spectrum of color. People are on a spectrum of color. So yeah, there were darker Europeans, but they were still European. So they came to the States anyway, because if they were free and they were white, they could come. That was the law of the United States. They could be naturalized citizens, right? So with all of these people coming from Europe, with all of these immigrants coming from Europe, it caused some social panic. Again, we're talking about this misrepresented fact that somehow Italians used to be considered Black. They were never really considered Black. Let me just, and I'm going to bust this out right now. The more Europeans that came, the more it caused a bit of public panic. And the whites in America, they wanted to create a more restrictive system. So it just wouldn't be a free for all of Europeans coming here. All right. So, in this attempt to restrict it, to make it a little tighter than just being free and white, they started coming up with proximity to blackness. Okay. Now, mind you, proximity to blackness is not blackness. All right. Being dirty white isn't being black. And that's where this starts to get disingenuous. They were never considered black, they were just a very dirty white. But let's talk about it. So, what would happen is that the immigration officials, they would embrace a caste system for white people. You know how in the black community we have a caste system for black people? We have what is in our backwards ass totally ignorant caste system that we have in the black community. We're all black, right? But then you have the yellow blacks, you have the brown blacks, the red blacks, and the dark blacks, right? We have a 4-tier, is it 5-tier? I don't know. I might have left somebody out. We have a stupid 5-tier caste system of color for blackness. Did you know that white people developed a similar system? These people who are making the argument Italians are black are lying. Italians weren't black. They were just part of the lower tier caste system of whiteness. So this whole Italians accessed whiteness is bullshit. But let's just get back into the history of it. So you had to be white, you had to be free to be able to be naturalized in the United States. That was the law of the land for a period of time. We're talking about back in like 1700s, around 1790, all of that, right? So in the 1700s, this was the law of the land. So what they did, because they were getting such an influx of free white people, is they created a tier system of color, a caste system of color, much like we have in the black community. They created it for white people, right? But notice black people weren't on this tier system because none of these white people were, they weren't really considered black, considered lower caste whites. So what you had was that some Europeans were designated to be whiter and more worthy of citizenship than others. Let me repeat that. This is not a system where some Europeans were considered black. That's how people keep presenting it, and that's very disingenuous. That's not how this thing worked. They were not considered black. They were considered less worthy of citizenship because they were not white of the whitest. Now, if anybody should understand this kind of caste system, it should be black people, because we have a caste system of our own and we know how our system works. Well, just know that Europeans had a system too, but they were all white. They didn't have to access whiteness because they were considered white. They just were considered bottom of the barrel white, not as worthy white. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? This black as a status thing, how it's been misrepresented? Have you out here thinking that black is literally a status and has nothing to do with skin color? When not only did white people separate whites from blacks, they created a caste system in whiteness of more worthy whites who were whiter and less worthy whites who were olive. That's how real it is about black not being a caste system. So I agree. Thank you. Thank you, Positive Queen on Purpose, because that's really what this all can be summed down to. Everybody wants to be black. Everybody wants to opt out of blackness. We are literally looking any kind of way to be separated from the low social class that comes with our skin color. We are looking, how can we flip this? How many ways can I be Aboriginal? Can I be, mixed because I'm 20 mixed? Nobody's really black. Can I be, just statusly black, but not like physically black? We're all trying to opt out of this kind of cage that we are in because of our skin color. I mean, we didn't create the cage for ourselves, and I understand people wanting to wiggle out of it, but like we still have to keep it real. All right, the Italians didn't access whiteness. They were never considered black. They were just considered a less worthy version of white. So let's get back into the history of this because I just want to break it down because a lot of people are, black is a status, it's not a skin color. We can access whiteness. Nah, it's not. And no, trust me, no white person has ever looked at you and gone, look at that status. That's not what they see. Look at that status over there. No, nobody's ever looked at you and gone, look at that black brain over there. No, that's not how this works. But we can keep playing with it anyway. So again, let's recap. Back in the 1700s, the only people that were allowed to immigrate to the United States had to be free and white. That pretty much limited immigration from Europe. That meant you could only basically come if you were from Europe. White. There was a huge influx of European immigrants. So the immigration officials had to find a way to pare this down. And so what they did is they started to categorize Europeans into sub-races of whiteness. Okay? They started to categorize Europeans into sub-races of whiteness. The key word here is whiteness. Some Europeans were considered to be whiter and more worthy of citizenship than other Europeans. And the Italians were at the bottom of that caste system. So if you were considered white, but too close to blackness, which was the Italians' problem, they were not considered black. They were considered white, but very close to black. So they were bottom tier whites. They were white trash. White. That is how they were treated, like white trash. But notice they were allowed to immigrate. The fact that they were allowed to immigrate speaks to the fact that they met the two criteria and the only criteria that existed. What were the two criteria? You had to be free, you had to be white. So we can debunk this whole thing about if they were considered black or not by just starting with the fact that they might have been considered white trash, but they met the two only criteria that was required for nationalization. And that was being free and white. Free and white. Free and white. Free and white. Well, Rozzy, that's where we might disagree, but that's another conversation. Rozzy said, I don't believe black is a skin color. There are people with our skin color that are not black. I would say, show me one. Show me a person who is our skin color, who is not oppressed as socially black. You show me one group of people not suffering oppression because they are a skin color, and I will agree that there are people out there with our skin color who are not black. You still feel what I'm saying? Because black is a status. Don't get me wrong. Black is a social status. But do you know what causes the social status? Anybody? What causes the social status of blackness? This is the thing that people want to act doesn't exist. What causes the social status of blackness? It's the color of your skin. That's what causes the social status of blackness. It's the skin that does it. So I can say that black is a social status that is judged by a person's skin color. And in fact, people who use the Italians as the example are actually proving my point. It was the depth of color of these Italians in comparison to the whitest of whites that lowered their social status as white people. Thank you, Cynthia G. I completely agree with Cynthia. She said white people have convoluted biology with the creation of race. So now people don't understand that your skin tone literally is what defines your so called race. I completely agree. And we only have to look throughout the globe to see that. Black is a social status, and that social status is determined by the color of your skin. You cannot separate the two things. I know people want to. I know people are keep saying Italians were considered black. They were never considered black. That's not true history. They were considered white trash. The fact that they were allowed to immigrate here when the criteria for naturalization and immigration was that you had to be white and free, it proves that they weren't black. They couldn't have immigrated here if they were considered black. They were white and free. They were just the lowest class of white. They were white trash. That's what they were. But they were white. They accessed their own whiteness. They access a higher tier of their whiteness. You know, when black people bleach their skin, they're trying to access light skinnedness. That's what the Italians did. They accessed light skinnedness among whites. I hope I'm saying this in a way that everybody can understand, because that's the real history of the thing. I don't know why people are out here presenting it like it's something other than what it was. You only have to crack open a history book to know it. So, with that said, because they were considered to have kind of dirty looking skin, and a lot of them had curly hair, which they're comparing to kinky hair, even though we know it's not the same, they were treated like the bottom of the barrel whites. They were called white niggers. Key word in white nigger. What is the key word in the term white nigger? What is the key word in that term, y'all? White. They weren't niggers, they were white niggers. They were bottom of the barrel white. You know how some people feel the darkest black people are bottom of the barrel black? They were white niggers. They were white niggers, not niggers, white niggers. I'm not trying to be vulgar here, but that's what they were called. People want to say, see, they were called white niggers, they were considered black. Nah, they were considered white niggers. They were considered white trash. White, white, white. Keyword, white. They accessed a higher tier in their whiteness. They didn't move from black to white. They moved from low bottom of the barrel white to more acceptable, you're not such trash white. And I just want to be very clear on that, because that's the real history on this thing. That is the real history of it. So remember, they came into the country as free white people. They were never considered black. The fact that they were allowed to immigrate here means that white people considered them white. They came to the country as free white people, but they took black jobs. That's why they were called white niggers. Let's really do this, okay? They took black jobs. They did jobs that were only fit for black people because they were the trash white people. You know, the trash white people, quote unquote, the ones that live in the hood amongst black people. What do we call them now? Wiggers, right? Is that what we call them? The Italians were the wiggers of their day. Not because they liked black people, because they didn't, but because they lived in areas that were different from where most of the white people lived. You know, the higher tier white people. They worked in the jobs where black people would often work. They worked in those factories. A lot of them lived among African Americans because they weren't accepted by whiter whites. They were the Wiggers of their time. But let me ask you something, y'all. Is a Wigger white? Is a Wigger white? Let me ask you, is a Wigger white? Yes or no? Are they white? Yes, they are. They are white. A Wigger literally is just a transforming of the word that the Italians were called, which is white nigger. Y'all just merged it together and called it new. How is it we know that Wiggers are white, but everybody's trying to pretend like the Italians were black? Make it all make sense. All of a sudden, we don't know what these terms mean. We want to flip it because we don't want to accept the fact that there's a group of people that literally hate our skin color. They don't hate our status. They hate our skin color, and ergo, our status is based on our skin color. Period. The Italians, they did not suffer that. The fact that they were allowed to immigrate to this country speaks to their whiteness, because no person was allowed at that time to come into America as an immigrant who was not white and free. They came here as free white people and were placed at the lowest totem pole of the white social class. They lived in the hood. Let me put this in modern day terms. They lived in the hood. They worked along black people. They were called white niggers, but they were still white. Legally, they were white. That's why they were legally able to immigrate to this country, because only white people could do that. Only free white people could do that. So why do we have people flipping this as if it's something that it wasn't, as if they were truly considered the same black as you or I? When those Italians were never considered black, they were always considered white. They were just considered trash white. One foot in the black pool white, but still white. And we need to really be clear on that. That is true history. This isn't Irene making stuff up to be controversial, y'all. That's the true history of this thing. Yes, Celeste, they're trying to rewrite history. We want to do anything to get away from our blackness. We will literally rewrite history as if your skin color has nothing to do with your oppression. This is just a social status, y'all. Just get your mind out of the black state of mind. My mind being in a black state of mind has nothing to do with my oppression. Somebody's hatred of how I look has something to do with my oppression. Your hatred of my skin color is the problem, not my identifying or not understanding that my blackness is simply a status. No, I can understand that you're not my superior and that your status should not be higher than mine all I want. Unless I'm about to take your power or you're about to stop acting like an ass, nothing changes. One of the two things has to happen. I've got to put you in your place, or you've got to give up your place. These are the sort of things that have to happen. Us pretending like this is not what it is not how this is going to work. Us creating a narrative for history that never existed is not how this is going to work. Us pretending Italians were ever the same as actual black people is not going to work, especially when they immigrated here as free white people. If they were black, they would have never been in this country because it would have been against the law for them to come as immigrants. So then they'll talk about how the Italians were lynched, right? Let's just bring it all out here. They'll talk about how the Italians were lynched. Black people got lynched, Italians got lynched. See, they're black. They both got lynched. You know what? What we forget is that white people don't respect each other. Y'all, this is part of their culture. In Europe, where there were no black people, well, let's talk about this another time. The Egyptians, for like 600 years, were giving black people as slaves to Europe. This Egypt worship that people are in baffles my mind because the Egyptians were whole integrationists who gave black slaves to the Europeans for 600 years before the first Europeans even began to colonize Africa. But we're not going to go there in this live. That's for a whole nother live. We'll talk about that. But for the most part, Europe was filled with white people. Okay? Europe was filled with white people. And white people are happy to oppress each other. This is what they do. Okay? I'm not surprised that Italians got lynched. Do you know that white people were lynching white people in Europe? They will lynch you. That's a thing they're into. They're about that life. They will chop each other's heads off, set each other on fire. They were coming up with weird torture chambers for each other. They were doing all this in Europe. Oh, an Italian person getting lynched doesn't make them black. Because if there were no black people around, white people would oppress each other. This is just how they move around life. White people will find somebody to oppress. And it will be another white person. That's what you guys don't realize. Lynchings were a thing in Europe. That's a thing they did over there. And worse, white people came up with some barbaric ways to torture each other. They were about that life. Like, they would not only torture each other, they would torture each other publicly because they got off on watching each other be tortured. They got off on watching each other be tortured in Europe with all white people. So why do you think they wouldn't lynch up the white trash of America? An Italian getting lynched didn't make them black. It just made them white and bottom tier, because white people will kill another white person in a heartbeat. They have no problem with it. Anybody who's ever studied the history of Europe knows that. These white people did cruel and unusual things to each other in the public square. They were about that life. And let an area go too long without somebody getting publicly tortured, the people would start to literally revolt. You would have to torture somebody every now and again, or the people would get upset. It's the only thing that kept the peace half the time. I'm not saying this to be funny or anything. I'm serious. That's real European history. Yeah, we need to crack open some books around here. We really do. We need to crack open some history books. The Europeans aren't afraid of their history. They tell it like it is. They have no shame, okay? The Europeans have no shame about their history. They will tell you about it themselves. So the lynching of the Italians didn't make them white. Again, the fact that they immigrated to the United States the lynchings of the Italians did not make them black. They were called white niggers or wiggers. They worked black jobs. They often lived around black people because they were white trash, but they were still considered white. They were lynched because white people, that's how they move, period. Not because they were black. Some white people got lynched in America too. White people are just violent. That's part of their culture. Violence is part of their culture. Am I saying that nobody else can be violent? No. Am I racist? No. I just know history, culture. The more barbaric, the more they like it. I'm not saying that to be mean or funny or pick on white people. I'm saying that because you only have to look at European history to know that. In fact, when they did the Italian lynchings, they did them what was traditional European style. So traditionally in Europe, when they would have a public flogging or a beheading or a burning, where they burn people alive, or a lynching or anything like that, they would bring the victim to the public square and they would make a big production of it. This is Europe we're talking about. And then they would do it and they would make sure everybody, there would be a town caller and he would go out and let everybody know, y'all, because they didn't have internet, so they had the little boy or young man. He would go around, he would scream and holler, tell everybody, come to the square, we're going to burn somebody, somebody's going to get hung or beheaded today. We're going to put somebody, they have these contraptions. These people took industrialism and they started making whole torture devices. We're going to be ripping somebody's arms and legs off today. I'm not making that up. This is the kind of stuff that they did. And the town crier would go out and all the white people would come and they would sit and they'd watch the person get ripped apart to death or have their head chopped off or be burned to death or whatever the torture of the day was. They would all sit there and watch it. So why is it a surprise that white people came to the Americas and they brought their culture with them? They brought their traditions with them. And so the Italians, the Wiggers, literally Wigger, white nigger, that's what they called them, the Wiggers of the time, the white trash of the time, they got that work. They were not black. They just got the work because that's what white people do. Let us not convolute white people being white people and being culturally consistent with white people being black. Can we talk some history today? Can we talk like real history today? Why are we even playing games with this? Let's just do the whole, background. Just because they will brutalize their own people the way that they would brutalize us doesn't mean that they think their own people are black. That's just what they do. They were doing that before they came to America. That's their culture. They carried those practices on from Europe and brought it to America because that's who they are. That was their culture. Not because they felt Italians were black. They just felt that they were white trash. They were on that Hitler stuff. If you had blonde hair and blue eyes, you were the best of the whites. Everything was downhill from there. You were still white, though. To prove that they were still white, when they wanted them to stop lynching the white people, they didn't really mind them lynching black people, y'all. But when they really wanted them to stop lynching white people, let me ask you, where do you think they took their anti-lynching campaign? Let's really dispense with this Italians were black thing. When they didn't mind them lynching black people, but when they wanted them to stop lynching white people, they went to England, okay? Sometime right before the 1900s, like in the late 1800s. So let's just follow the history of this thing. In the 1700s, you couldn't come into America as an immigrant unless you were white and free, right? The Italians came into America because they were both white and free. And all the other bottom of the barrel whites, they were allowed into the country because they were white and they were free. That would be not black, okay? Now, because they were white trash, they lived amongst the blacks, they worked with the blacks, but they were still considered white because they qualified to come in the country. So we know that they were white. They were just called white niggers or wiggers, white, trash. That's what they were called. But then when around, right before the 19th century, in the late 1800s, people were like, well, damn, you guys keep treating us like actual niggers. We're not actual niggers. We're white niggers. Emphasis on the word white. Right? Edward X said, why are we so concerned about white Italians? Edward, I don't know if you read the title. It's because the title of this is Black a Status? And we're worried about white Italians because they are one of the main examples used to prove that Black is not anything to do with your skin. It has to do with your social status. So I have to speak about white Italians because it's their kind of white trash groups that were being used to prove that Blackness was a social status and had nothing to do with skin color. So in order for me to debunk this, I have to look at the historical aspects of it. I have to speak to the talking point. So that's why we're concerned about white Italians. So with that said, when they wanted to stop the lynching of white people, they went to England. Why do you think they went to England, y'all? Because they were lynching white people. They went back to the source. And when they went to the source, do you know what the source said? The Europeans were, okay, we're not with the lynching of white people, but don't come to us, trying to advocate for any black people, any black brutes. If they want to roast a Negro, because they used to put black people on spits and literally roast them like a pig. But it is what it is. The fact of the matter is, Italians were given a lower social status, the lowest status of whiteness. They were made white trash because at the end of the day, when the Civil War ended, they needed cheap labor. And somebody had to do the work. The same reason that white people oppressed each other in Europe is the same reason Italians were made white trash in America. Because somebody poor has to do the work. And there wasn't enough nigger forced labor after slavery to get it done. So they had the olive-skinned white people do it. And that's the end of story. End of story. Everything, all these parallels that people are drawing. Well, they were both considered, to be criminal. That doesn't make you black. Because again, the one thing that will always debunk this is the fact that they were able to immigrate to the United States. And if white people really considered them black, it would have been illegal for them to immigrate here and gain citizenship, because the only immigrants that were allowed to come to the United States had to be both white and free. Period. They were free white people that were considered white trash. So is black a social status? Yes, it is. But what is the deciding factor in that social status? Skin color. Skin color is the deciding factor in that social status. That is globally. Globally. That's why I did that video, Decolonize. Globally, the darkest people have the lowest social status, because their social status is based on their skin color, not their mindset, not if they know how to properly access whiteness. It is based on their skin color. And no matter how much you guys try to run from that, you won't be able to. We've got to face it head on, because pretending like it's something that it's not won't stop this thing. It's not going to stop it. You guys think if we erase all the lines, that there will be no lines for anybody to discriminate against. But what you don't recognize is that we cannot avoid this thing. We must deal with the problem head on. We must deal with the fact that Europeans came up with a class system for human beings. We must deal with evolutionary theory and how evolutionary theory was a classing of humans before it was ever a classing of animals. And that the social status of human beings was considered survival of the fittest by the European. And within the classes, the Aboriginal, the Negroid, the Mongoloid, and the Caucasoid, which within the original four classes of race that were created by whites, the determining factor of social status was proximity to whiteness. No one will ever be able to erase that. Us sitting here pretending like that is not historical fact will not help us access anything. Now, a revolution might help us access some stuff. Y'all stopping wanting to disassociate from this thing because you don't like how it makes you feel might help us access some things. But for us to sit there and act like Blackness was not literally created to socially categorize human beings by the color of their skin, that's not going to help anything. Okay? Us saying Italians were Black at one point is not going to help shit. They were never Black. Italians, the Irish, these people were never Black. They immigrated to this country because they were free and white. The only criteria that was required for them to come here was to be free and white. Where do you get Black from that? They were free white people who were considered bottom of the barrel whites. The same way some of you consider dark-skinned Blacks bottom of the barrel Blacks. It's no different. And Black is a social status. It is a social status determined by your proximity to whiteness, period. I can prove this with historical fact. The historical race status that white people created, that we teach in our school, that we call Darwinism or evolutionary theory, macro evolutionary theory, is rooted in the idea that the Aboriginal is at the bottom of race and social status on this planet, followed by the Negroid, followed by the Mongoloid, and at the top of the chain is the Caucasoid. And your social status, Black person, or whatever you want to call yourself today because you don't like the word Black, is determined by your proximity to the most evolved of the human species, which are the whites. The closer in proximity you are to whiteness, the higher your social status. The closer in proximity you are to the Aboriginal, the lower your social status. These are facts. You don't have to like the facts, but this does not change the reality of this thing. That is how the world operates. That is why in every country that you go to, you will find that the Blackest people, the darkest people, will have the lowest social status. And the whitest people will have the highest social status. This is true everywhere. This is so true that in the Black community, we too have a hierarchy of skin color in the Black community, do we not? Shall we sit here and pretend like we don't understand the game? Sunny Boxing Talk said, our ancestors never called themselves Black. That was a name given to us by slaveholders. Okay, that's fine. But language is for communication. So when I say Black, you know what I mean. Just period. We don't know what our ancestors called each other, quite frankly. We have no clue. We don't know what our ancestors called each other. The only thing you know about your ancestors is what white people have told you, just straight up. And the only part of Africa that white people respect is Egypt. So really all most of us know is shit about Egypt. You know, Egypt, the traitorous, integrationist nation of Africa that everybody that's black just loves so much because white people have taught you Egypt is the best thing since sliced bread. You have whole, you know, what do they call them? Hotep people out here, so enlightened, kill whitey type people out here, loving Egypt when Egypt was highly integrationist and gave white people black slaves way before chattel slavery ever came to be. But again, I'll save that conversation for another live because I know I can't say anything bad about Egypt around here because y'all are heavily indoctrinated in white schools and you guys love the fuck out of Egypt, okay? The one thing you're going to find at the museum other than Greek and Roman art is going to be Egyptian stuff. Because if there's some things that white people love, it's Greece, Rome, and Egypt. But again, I will not go there because I know it will be the triggering of the century if Irene Dare says and talks shit about Egypt. Don't let me get into some historical facts about Egypt and have half the black people in the world pissed off at me because the white man told you Egypt was the best part of Africa. Kemet, Egypt, call it what you like. Call it what you like. I'll save the Egypt conversation for another time. Because my real historical facts might be too much. Like this might be too much for one conversation. We may not want to go there right now. Okay? The first time I ever tried to nicely say Egypt was not the best part of Africa, people came for my neck. If I tell you guys what I really think of Egypt, if I start telling you what the Egyptians really, how they were really moving with the Greeks and the Romans, y'all are out here, you hate mixed people and swirlers so bad, but love the fuck out of Egypt. Make it all make sense. Okay, let me shut up. Y'all, let me get out of here. Let me get out of here. Let me get out of here. I can't even do it. Thank you, Cynthia. Cynthia, don't say it, Cynthia. Cynthia said, Egyptians were very integration minded, just like Black Americans. Don't say it, Sin. Don't say it. We cannot speak against Egypt. Okay. Y'all have been indoctrinated into the white school too much for me to say anything about Egypt. Okay. Y'all have been too raised up on this white understanding of Africa for me to really speak any truth today. So I will save the Egypt conversation for another live. I will come with a lot of historical documented fact for you so that when you guys try to crucify me, you'll have to be crucifying the truth over here, okay? Because we're not going to be in a whole delusion. Yes, Cynthia, the Egyptians were the original swirlers. They were. You have people out here hating white people but loving Egypt. Nobody loved white people more than the Egyptians. Nobody loved white people more than them. They loved them. They loved them. And I mean loved them. Half of our ancestors aren't even freaking from Egypt. But whatever. Let me again, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. I just wanted to, not this time, maybe Sin and I, if you want to travel down the rabbit hole with me, but maybe we can discuss Egypt another time. I really just wanted to come on here and talk about Black being a status. Now, if you guys have other groups of so-called white Black people you would like to present for my consideration, I will be happy to debunk that bullshit the way I debunked this Italian stuff today. But in conclusion, Italians were never considered Black. They were considered white niggers, AKA wiggers, AKA white trash. However, they were allowed to immigrate here under the laws of the day, which meant that they had to be free and white. Ergo, they were never actually Black people. They did not access whiteness. They accessed their own uplifting in white society, okay? You're not going to be able to access whiteness the way white people access whiteness. Now, you guys can attempt to get out of this socio-political revolution any way you want. But one day, you and I are going to have a meeting of the minds. If that takes me debunking every line of bullshit that you guys pull out to avoid getting into fisticuffs with people, so be it. I will play this game with you all day. You bring me a way that you think you're going to get white people to give up their privilege, and I will show you how it's absolute BS. All right, let's play this game for a while. Black is a social status, not skin color. Debunked. You are welcome. I didn't erase your first comment. I'm not even in a space where I can erase anything, but I appreciate it as always, Mr. Muhammad. So with that said, you guys, I'm going to get out of here. Edward said, how do I suggest we destroy white degeneracy? Socio-political revolution. Let me say it again. Socio-political revolution. It's called social revolution, but because people don't quite understand what that means, socio-political revolution. Nothing less will be what fixes this problem. Until you guys get to where I am, where we fully accept that this is the reality of things, we will keep having these conversations where we come up with new and inventive ways to access whiteness that don't include actual revolution. But I'm going to stand on my socio-political revolutionary square. You guys stand on your black as a status square, and we'll see which person is right. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here, you guys, and I will talk to you later.